Ja, hallo allemaal, daar zijn we er weer, RHTVLive. Ja, goed. Zoals altijd gaan we naar geopolitiek kijken. En ja, ook wat er zoal in Nederland gebeurt. Oh, we worden gebeld. Wacht even hoor, even pauze. Ja mensen, daar zijn we weer. We werden gebeld tijdens een uitzending. Dat kan gebeuren. En ja, we laten natuurlijk zien waar we vandaan streamen. Dat is dus niet Afrika. Nee, daar zitten we niet. We zitten in het mooie Maastricht. Ja, zo. So we are streaming live from Maastricht. And of course, we're going to look at geopolitics and politics in the country, right? And let's first take a look at what's happening in the Netherlands. I found this clip here. Wait. Zo, we gaan even kijken naar wat er in Nederland gebeurt. We hebben dit clipje gevonden hier zo. En dit is heel erg interessant. The Hague Central Station, the Netherlands. Now, let's take a look at the subtitles here.
Beste reizigers, helaas moeten wij u meedelen dat u betrokken bent bij genocide. De Nederlandse regering gebruikt uw stem en uw belastinggeld om Israël militair, politiek en economisch te steunen bij de vernietiging van Gaza en haar bevolking. Zo weigert Nederland om te vragen om een wapenstilstand. Daarnaast doet uw regering er alles aan om Israël in de VN te beschermen tegen sancties. Ook in de Tweede Kamer staat men aan de kant van genocide. Een meerderheid van het Nederlandse parlement heeft gestemd om de uitspraak van het ICJ naast zich neer te leggen. Nederland levert ook onderdelen voor de F-35-bommers die dood en verderf zaaien in Gaza. Achter gesloten deuren riep minister-president Rutte:
wat kunnen we zeggen zodat het lijkt alsof Israël geen oorlogsmisdaden begaat?
Het wordt tijd om de waarheid onder ogen te zien. Nederland staat weer aan de verkeerde kant van de geschiedenis. Het wordt tijd om je uit te spreken. Toon lef. Laat Gaza niet in de steek.
So this is happening in the Netherlands, right? They say that the Dutch government is supporting genocide and giving weapons and support to Israel, right? So this is happening in the Netherlands. This was yesterday at about 12 o'clock. And we're going to take a look at other stuff, right? Because it's very important to know what's happening in and around our planet. Now, normally when we talk about Africa, we point out the obvious countries, such as Ethiopia, on a warpath, Egypt, Sudan, Chad, Niger. But we always forget what's happening in the Central African Republic. Ja, we gaan even naar de Centraal-Afrikaanse Republiek kijken. Kijken wat daar allemaal gebeurt. Hè. Dat wordt meestal over het hoofd gezien. Maar het is erg belangrijk om dit te snappen. Hè, wat hier allemaal in de Centraal-Afrikaanse Republiek gebeurt. 10.000 kinderen vechten in een soort van machtsstrijd in de Centraal-Afrikaanse Republiek. So 10,000 kids are fighting in a power struggle in the Central African Republic. And we're going to take a look at some images from the Central African Republic, right? And let's take a look at this here. Central African Republic says 10,000 children are still fighting alongside armed groups. So we're going to give some background here, but first we're going to show this. Now this is very sad. The children are not supposed to fight with weapons and stuff like that. You know, this is insanity. Insanity. Now let's take a look at this here.
About 10,000 children are still fighting alongside armed groups in Central African Republic more than a decade after the civil war broke out, the government said on Monday. The Minister for Family and Gender said in a statement that children are still being recruited as fighters, spies, messengers, cooks, and even used as sex slaves. While 15,000 children have escaped from rebel forces, she said, many are traumatized and find it difficult to return to normal life. The mineral-rich, impoverished nation has had conflict since 2013 when predominantly Muslim Seleka rebels seized power and forced then-President Francois Bozize from office. Mostly Christian militias fought back, also targeting civilians. The United Nations, which has a peacekeeping mission in the country, estimates that the fighting has killed thousands and displaced over 1 million people. In 2019, a peace deal was reached between the government and 14 armed groups, but fighting continues. The UN is trying to prevent children from joining armed groups and make it easier for those released to reintegrate into the society.
So what is happening in the Central African Republic, right? We gaan even kijken naar wat er gebeurt in de Centraal-Afrikaanse Republiek. 10.000 kinderen, ja, die moeten gaan strijden en zoiets allemaal. Die kinderen die behoren gewoon te spelen, die behoren een potje voetbal te doen of iets in die trend. Nee. Ze hebben wapens in hun hand en ze moeten de andere kant zien te verslaan met een wapen. Heel erg triest. Maar goed, eerst gaan we even wat achtergrondinformatie geven over wat er in de Centraal-Afrikaanse Republiek gebeurt. Waarom gebeurt het? Hè? Waarom is het in een staat van oorlog? So we're going to give some background information on what's happening in the Central African Republic. Why is it this way? Right? And we're going to show you some images from the Central African Republic explained by Al Jazeera. Right? Why are they fighting in the Central African Republic? Start here. Well, let's take a look. We gaan even kijken naar wat er gebeurt. Eigenlijk in een notendop heb je dus een president die ervan beschuldigd wordt dat hij foute dingen heeft gedaan en zoiets allemaal. En die president is dus gevlucht. En daarna kreeg je een andere president die de macht overnam. En ja, die zit ook een beetje in een soort van machtsstrijd. Omdat je overal van die rebellengroepen hebt en zoiets. Die heeft het land geprobeerd te stabiliseren. En ja, die gevluchte president, die is dan weer terug in de Centraal-Afrikaanse Republiek. En die gebruikt een van die rebellengroepen om de andere president uit te kunnen schakelen.
Let's talk about the Central African Republic. The fighting there is so bad that more than 200,000 people have fled their homes since December.
Most of them across the river to the Democratic Republic of Congo.
There's a tug of war between two men, the president who just got himself re-elected in a messy vote, and a former president who's under UN sanctions and wants his old job back.
An investigation was launched against him, but to this day his whereabouts remain unknown.
So why did an election stir things up? Who's fighting who in the CAR? And why are the Russians in there? The Central African Republic is a former French colony that's basically the same size as France. But where France has almost 70 million people, the CAR has less than 5 million. And while it has a lot of natural resources, the average person lives on less than $2 a day. Things were bad under colonial rule, but independence in the CAR has also been a rough ride. The man meant to become the first president died in a dodgy plane crash. In the 70s, the CAR had a brutal leader who declared himself president for life, then emperor, before the French got rid of him. There have been coups, 2 civil wars, and a handful of disappointing peace deals.
It's a country where corruption has been the nature of governance, where the state has been absent from the day-to-day lives of ordinary people.
So 60 years later, the CAR is pretty much run by whoever has the most guns. There are maybe 20 militias who control 2/3 of the country and do pretty much whatever they like. Some of them started out with some kind of cause, but many resorted to killing, extortion, and fighting over resources. Now, the main rivalry is often laid out as being between the Seleka, which is mostly made up of Muslim groups, and the Anti-Balaka, who are mostly Christian fighters. But it's not as simple as Muslims versus Christians. There are all kinds of shifting alliances and other local disputes in the mix.
Stabilizing the country is an enormous challenge, especially outside the capital, Bangui. There are vast areas of country where nobody is in control.
Okay, to understand the fighting going on now, we have to get into the fight between these two, President Faustin Archange Touadéra and former President François Bozizé. At one point, they were in the same government. Touadéra was Bozizé's prime minister. So Bozizé took power in a coup in 2003, and he's been accused of having a hand in all sorts of atrocities, which he denies. Fast forward 10 years, and Bozizé is overthrown by Seleka rebels, and he leaves the country. What followed were 2 years of conflict and chaos. The Seleka struggled to keep control. An alliance known as Anti-Balaka emerged to fight the Seleka. It was made up of many Christian militias.
At the beginning, the Anti-Balaka targeted only the military base of the Seleka groups, but then this turned into targeted attacks against the Muslim population.
Eventually, France's military stepped in, and there was a peace deal between the government and some of the militias. They called elections, and Touadéra ended up winning. So in 2016, Touadéra is the president. Meanwhile, Bozizé is in exile, and he's been accused of supporting Anti-Balaka, which is why the UN imposed sanctions on him. Now, while Touadéra was in office, things did calm down a bit, but militias still controlled large parts of the country, and the peace deal ended up falling apart. So in 2019, the government signed a new deal with 14 armed groups. The plan was to integrate some militia leaders into the government and fighters into the army. Things were looking up, and the elections last year were supposed to mark a new start. And then Bozizé came back on the scene. He returned to the CAR and wanted to run for president, but the Constitutional Court banned him, saying he failed to meet the standards of good morality.
Bozizé himself had never relinquished the desire to come power. It was no surprise that his return kicked off a new cycle of violence, kicked off a new start to political tensions.
This time, some Seleka and Anti-Balaka factions put their differences aside and formed a new alliance called the Coalition of Patriots for Change.
Using guerrilla warfare tactics, the rebels have taken control of more than 2/3 of the country.
Many say Bozizé is leading the rebels, though he denies that.
Bozizé offered this coalition political leadership and money in unity as well. These groups have effectively declared that they will not support Touadéra.
Now, all of that happened before the elections in December. So when it came time to vote, many people, especially in rebel-controlled areas, either couldn't or were too scared to. But in the end, Touadéra was re-elected president. And even though opposition groups accused him of fraud, the Constitutional Court ruled that he won in the first round.
Le peuple est avec lui, malgré les rebelles, malgré le CPC. Ils ont voulu gâcher ces élections et qu'on a tenu bon.
You can imagine, though, how Touadéra's enemies reacted. The CPC, the coalition of militias, stepped up their war, and people have been trying to escape.
Oui, personnellement, avec les enfants, j'ai pris mes enfants et les deux là, j'ai porte avec les petites sœurs que j'ai suivies.
They're running from murder, rape, and kidnapping.
More than half
of its 5 million people are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. And people question why all these Africans come towards Europe. En mensen vragen zich af waarom zoveel Afrikanen naar Europa toe gaan. Nou, dat komt omdat hun land gewoon kapot is. Their country is broken, so they come to another country in hopes of finding happiness and stuff like that. So this is happening, right? Yet another African country which was destabilized and, no perspective on peace within the country. It's a shithole there.
5 million people are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance.
Things are now so much worse in a country where a quarter of the population was already displaced. Right now, the government is fighting a huge group of heavily armed and well-organized militias, so it's relying on outside help to turn things around. 300 French soldiers, 11,000 UN peacekeeping troops, the Rwandan army's in there, Russia too. They say to train the CAR army.
The instruction is happening in Russian.
Но еще раз говорю, здесь будет именно Россия проводить политику именно мирный переход.
So a whole lot of outsiders, each with their own interests. The people of the CAR, though, have other concerns.
People want to be able to go back to their businesses, to the fields, not to be scared and not to have to flee every month to the bush or to a neighboring country.
People reckon the best way forward is to somehow revive that peace deal from 2019. To do that, the president, the former president, and all their allies need to come together. But that won't be easy in a country with a lot of players and too many guns.
That will not be easy, right? Because you don't have a third party leading the talks, right? That is what's needed, a third party leading the talks. Now, relations can get better, as you see with Russia and North Korea. Not only are they getting closer with armament, right, but they're also letting tourists inside of North Korea. Now, you may say it's a conspiracy theory, but nope. We're here to give geopolitics, and we're here to show what's happening in and around our world. So let's take a look at the Russian tourists that went to Pyongyang. Here we have Arirang News, right, which is from South Korea, and they're keeping an eye on their northerly neighbors.
There are more signs that show Pyongyang and Moscow forging closer ties from military to economic and cultural cooperation and to the political sector. Just last week, 100 Russian tourists visited Pyongyang on a ski trip. And North Korea recently sent a political delegation to visit Russia. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-soo reports.
North Korea has opened its arms to tourists from Russia. According to a Facebook post by the Russian embassy in Pyongyang, 100 Russian tourists arrived in the North's capital on February 9th. The embassy said this was the first visit after North Korea opened its borders following a 4-year closure due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The tourists included representatives of the tourism industry and media and travelers from all over Russia, from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok. It added the tourists will stay in the north for 4 days and get acquainted with key attractions in Pyongyang while visiting the Masikmyeong ski resort, known as one of the most modern major ski resorts the regime built. The recent hype in Pyongyang-Moscow exchanges hasn't stopped there. On Monday, a delegation of the regime's ruling party officials left Pyongyang to visit Russia. North Korea's official newspaper Rodong-Sinmun reported Tuesday that the delegation is on the trip at the invitation of Russia's ruling United Russia Party. The delegation plans to attend an international inter-party forum organized by the Russian party. A senior official at South Korea's unification ministry told reporters on Tuesday the government has no comment on ordinary interactions between Pyongyang and Moscow, but added that any illegal interactions such as arms transfers or labor dispatches will need to stop as they violate the UN Security Council resolutions. Moscow and Pyongyang have strengthening ties ever since North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made a rare overseas trip to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin last September.
You see, this is what happens when you corner a cat, right? It gets other strays, and So who knows? Maybe the ties of North Korea and Russia will strengthen, and they will open their borders towards Russia, and hopefully set free some North Koreans that want to escape North Korea, right? So, ja, dit gebeurt. Er zijn Russische toeristen naar Pyongyang toegegaan. En de band tussen Rusland en Noord-Korea wordt alleen maar sterker. We zagen ook Kim Jong-un naar Vladivostok toe gaan afgelopen jaar. So we saw the leader of North Korea went to Vladivostok in Russia. Right here we have North Korea. And the ties between North Korea and Russia are strengthening. And who knows, maybe North Korea will be, will turn its agenda and stabilize, right? Because in the last period, North Korea was shooting missiles towards the Sea of Japan and the Yellow Sea, right? And basically a hostile state, and they say it's in self-defense, But very interesting to see what's happening in North Korea. We also know that stuff is off the table between North and South Korea. There was an anti-flight ban, right? So South Korea could not fly over North Korea, and North Korea could not fly over South Korea. But that's off the table, and North Korea says the only way to unification is war, right? So the diplomatic talks are off the table, and North Korea is trying to find a new neighbor, and Russia is opening its doors towards North Korea. So very interesting to see what's happening there. Ja, het is heel erg interessant om te kijken naar wat in Noord-Korea gebeurt. Hè. Ze openen hun grenzen met Rusland. Toeristen zijn naar Pyongyang toegegaan. En erg interessant om dat in de gaten te houden. We also saw American tourists in North Korea, in Pyongyang. Otto Warmbier, I believe his name is. yeah, he got arrested for ripping up a poster, and he was brought back to the U.S. And when he was brought back, he was very thin, and he died in the U.S. We will always remember Otto Warmbier for taking a poster of the North Korean leader. So here we have Otto Warmbier. What happened to Otto Warmbier in North Korea? He took a poster of the beloved leader, and he got jailed. And he actually testified and said he was sorry and this and that. So we're going to take a look at this here, even though it's mainstream media still.
The horrifying and mystifying story of Otto Warmbier. He was a promising young student at an elite American university who was arrested in North Korea. The regime there held Warmbier for more than a year, only junior his life. And 21-year-old Otto Warmbier attempting to steal a propaganda poster from a hotel in North Korea.
You are not allowed to steal poster. You are American. Come on, it's a poster, man. It's like, oh my God. You got detained for stealing a poster? Really? Really? Oh, man. Anyway.
Korea.
Please save my life. Please think of my family.
What followed was a tearful confession and a sentence to 15 years of hard labor. 17 months later.
You American work for us.
Later, Warmbier was carried off a plane on U.S. soil, unable to walk, talk, or respond to verbal commands.
We're thrilled that our son is on American soil, and I'm able to talk to you on Otto's behalf, and I'm able to wear the jacket that...
We are very sorry for your loss, Mr. Warmbier. North Korea is a wacko republic, put it that way, right? So, yeah, you have that going on, right? The relations between Russia and North Korea strengthening, and there's a lot more going on. We also have journalists that have been attacked in the Gaza Strip, right? One is very, very injured, and we're going to take a look at this here.
With breaking news, just north of Rafah in southern Gaza, 2 journalists have been injured in an Israeli drone strike. Al Jazeera correspondent Ismail Abu Omar is one of them. Cameraman Ahmed Mata was also hit, and Mata, we understand, is in serious condition. Both of them have been transferred to the European hospital for treatment. A doctor at the European hospital in Khan Yunis has given an update on Ismail Abu Omar's condition.
Al Jazeera's correspondent Ismail Abu Omar arrived at the makeshift hospital after suffering severe injuries. He was targeted by a drone missile close to the hospital. Upon examination, his right leg was already severed, in addition to shrapnel all across his chest and head, as well as his left leg. We suspect his femoral artery is cut off at the bottom of his leg. We administered the necessary first aid before transferring him to the European hospital, where he was rushed to the operation room. He was bleeding heavily, lost a lot of blood to the degree that his blood pressure and pulse were not readable. This means he is in a very critical condition and may lose his life as a result of this severe hemorrhage.
Well, our correspondent Hani Mahmoud joins us live from the ground in Rafah in the south. Hani, tell us a little bit more about what's going on. It sounds like a really critical situation.
Yes, Nastasia, and this is the intense situations that are getting tougher and tougher by the hour here in Rafah city. Just within the past couple hours, more displaced families in northern Rafah city experience yet one more time the horror of unpredictable falling bombs as a drone fired the missile targeting two journalists who were doing field work documenting the difficult living conditions and the experiences that the displaced families have been living through since the beginning of the war. Correspondent and colleague Ismail Abu Omar from Al Jazeera was targeted directly by a missile fired by a drone along with his cameraman. Both of them were rushed to a Najjar hospital, a small-sized hospital, largely unprepared for the kind of injuries that Ismail and his cameraman sustained. They were transferred to Gaza European Hospital where they underwent an immediate surgery in which Ismail had the doctor had no other choice but make a tough decision to amputate his leg from the knee down as it was pretty much shattered, all the bones shattered to the point it was only a skin that attached it to the remaining part of his body. Tough situation.
Horrible things to hear, right? What's happening over there in Rafah. Now, the last time we focused our reader on Rafah, we explained Rafah is basically a city split into two. You have Rafah in the Gaza Strip and you have Rafah in Egypt, right? So it's basically one city split into two. And, the Egyptian side is strengthening the borders, right? Not letting the Palestinians through, and the Palestinians have nowhere to go instead of actually living, you are living like a rat, right? A lab rat. Very, very sad to see. Last time we followed a family that went from Rafah to the middle of the country, or not even a country, the Strip. It used to be a country, but the Strip, and they also have nowhere to go. And so this is happening. You had Joe Biden saying, the president of Egypt, and he kind of slipped up on that, He didn't mention Sisi, but someone else. Or he basically said, well, what did he say? We're going to take a look at what Joe Biden had said. Joe Biden clips of Egypt leader. Let's see. Here. We found the video clip. What happened here? Are we still on? I guess so. So here we have Joe Biden calls the president of Egypt the president of Mexico.
The hostage negotiation. I'm of the view, as you know, that the conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in.
The president of Mexico, Sisi, did not allow the gates to open for humanitarian aid to come in. This is a direct quote from Joe Biden, who actually says his memory is good. It's really amazing, really amazing. You know, the president of Mexico is not in the Middle East, okay? The president of Mexico is not called Sisi. That is the president of Egypt, who used to be a general, right? But yeah, he's saying that humanitarian aid went into Gaza. Well, let's look at the border of Egypt, and we can find out ourselves. Satellite images reveal how Egypt tightened borders with Gaza. No, we have to go back.
Checkpoints along its border with Gaza, that satellite images are revealing this. Now, in November, construction crews began working on a raised strip of land some 200 meters away from the fence dividing Egypt from the Gaza Strip. It's now 3.5 kilometers long. That brings the total length of the earth barrier to some 14 kilometers. We understand Egypt is also building a new concrete wall along the old border wall. Well, Israel's advance to the south of Gaza has been raising tensions with Egypt. The two countries signed a formal peace treaty back in 1979 based on what's called the Camp David Accords. It lays out a complicated set of agreements about land and borders. Now, importantly, it limits the presence of Egypt's military in the Sinai Peninsula. A separate agreement was also then signed in 2005 after Israeli soldiers and settlers withdrew from the Gaza Strip. And that covered how the Rafah border crossing was to be run, as well as how Egypt could deploy guards along that border. But Israel is now talking about relocating huge numbers of Palestinians away from Rafah. Egypt has warned that any attempt to move people across the border could lead to the termination of the treaty and the other agreements, too, between the two countries. Well, let's now bring in Mahjoub Zweri. He's the director of the Gulf Studies Center and a professor of Middle East politics at Qatar University. Mahjoub, always great to have you. As we've been reporting, Egypt has been clear that any forced mass displacement of people from Gaza is a red line for them. We see they're already fortifying the border area. What does that red line mean to Cairo? What kind of action could we see?
You know, since November, there was a different messages coming from Cairo about the situation in Gaza. And the most important two messages: one, no displacement, people will not be allowed to go to Sinai. And the other important message, there will be no military operation on what's so-called Philadelphia cross-border with Egypt. And the security of that basically area will be under the Egyptians. And those two messages basically were obvious between both.
Now, imagine this, right? The U.S. has a border wall which is not finished, and many refugees go into the U.S., right, to destabilize. Now, if we look at Egypt, you'll see that they're strengthening their border and making a bigger wall, right? But that is good. That is good. But when America does it, no, that's bad. That's bad. You know, it really is amazing. So the people in Gaza can go nowhere, right? They're sealed off. They cannot access the Mediterranean. They cannot go into Israel. They cannot go into Egypt. They need to stay on that small strip of land and survive, basically, while everything around them is basically destroyed. You know, very sad to see what's happening here. And yeah, what can happen there can also happen here, right? Because in the Netherlands we have a new law, distribution law, which tells that the refugees must be distributed throughout all of the Netherlands, right? We have a refugee center a centralized refugee center. So all the refugees that come to the Netherlands come to Ter Apel first, right? But that centralized refugee center is so filled up with refugees that, you know, it's a nuisance for the people in Ter Apel. So now a new law has passed so that the refugees can be distributed throughout all of the Netherlands. So this is happening. And this was also a stab towards the new coalition of Wilders, right? And, you know, that coalition is also basically almost dead because the NSA, Pieter Omtzigt, stepped out of the negotiation table, and it's going to be harder to form a new right-wing cabinet. So that is all happening in our beautiful country, the Netherlands. So we took a look on the world, right? We went to the Central African Republic. We explained what's happening there. And, you know, we're doing this in 2 languages, even though it's more English than Dutch. We doen het in 2 talen. We hebben zo net de Centraal-Afrikaanse Republiek laten zien, wat daar allemaal gebeurt. En ja, zo houden we dus de hele wereld in de gaten. We're looking at the world, right? Because it's my planet as it's your planet. You must have respect towards the people wherever they're from, right? And, you know, on basis of respect, you can understand each other. So that is what's needed, you know. And people always say, you're taking sides. Oh, you're taking the side of Russia when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. Now, this is objectively, right? You have the US overthrowing the regime in Kiev and installed a new regime, and they were anti-Russian, you know, Ukrainian nationalists who idolized Nazis like Bandera and stuff like that. So, you know, this is all being used as a weapon against Russia, right? We know the Nazis were sponsored by Wall Street. We know the Bolsheviks were sponsored by Wall Street, right? So we know who the real enemy is, and that is the military-industrial complex, who makes all these proxies, such as the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which split up into 3 parties: Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and the Northern Alliance, right? So, and Al-Qaeda got another name, ISIS, and they were in Syria trying to overthrow Assad, right? Even the Council on Foreign Relations were like, we need Al-Qaeda on our side now to overthrow Assad, you know? So it's very important to know how the game is being played. Afghanistan is rich of resources and stuff like that, and they make a proxy, a group that controls the country, so they have an enemy, you know, to invade. This is the playbook, right? But why do you think the U.S. has been in Afghanistan for 20 years? If you look at the First World War, it's been like four years somewhat. And the Second World War was also 4 or 5 years. So why does Afghanistan take 20 years? You know, because you're financing your own enemy. And this is what's happening. This is what's happening all around the world, right? So we are watching and we are trying to explain what's going on. For nothing, right? This is all for nothing. I'm not asking money. I'm just asking you to share this very important information. Where do you see in the media them talking about the Central African Republic? Well, you see here on RHTVLive, right? We are the tip of the spear because we know what's going on. So let's see how long we are live. 47 minutes. It's like 15 minutes for me. You know, I can do this for hours. So we're going to take a look at Al Jazeera and see what else they have of newsworthy news. And let's take a look. Here we have Al Jazeera. And they are from Qatar, right? Now, many people don't know where Qatar is. It's in the Middle East, a small country. Anyway, we're going to take a look at some video here. The Texas border crisis. Hey, that is interesting, isn't it? You know, Texas is not allowed to defend themselves, but Egypt, yeah, you know, strengthen the border, you know, don't let the Palestinians in. Very, very sad to see what's going on. The Netherlands also wants to sell parts to Israel to make a jet fighter and stuff like that. But the judge of the International Court of Justice said, nope, you're not going to do that. Now the Dutch government wants to circumvent what the judge had said. So that's also something to take, right? Rafah airstrikes. Well, let's see what's happening over there.
Palestinians fear the night. That's when it becomes more difficult to search for survivors or for body parts scattered by falling Israeli bombs. Ambulances, the ones spared by Israel, ferry the wounded to ill-equipped, short-staffed medical facilities that are overwhelmed with patients. And survivors tell horrifying details of their children's last moments.
They shot my son. He's only 14 years old. He got a bullet like this one right into his chest. I don't believe he'll survive. My daughter's brain was blown out. I tried to comfort her before she died.
Israel says it's targeting Hamas fighters.
I'm sorry for your loss, madam. Very, very sorry. Sorry that this is happening. Sorry that my government is supplying weapons and stuff like that. I'm sorry. You know, that's the only thing I can say. You lost your daughter. Her brains were blown out. Blown out. And his son or her son was shot. Maybe he won't survive it. Now, imagine that's your kid.
A bullet like this one right into his chest. I don't believe he'll survive. My daughter's brain was blown out. I tried to comfort her before she died.
Israel says it's targeting Hamas fighters in Rafah, a city previously designated as a safe zone. Palestinian women and children say that's a lie.
Since dawn, Israeli tanks have been shelling us.
The front door and windows were destroyed, and we were forced to take shelter in the staircase. We got ourselves together and came out waving a white flag. The Israeli soldiers arrested my son and 2 other young men. They stripped off their clothes. We were given 2 minutes to leave the area.
Those who survive the Israeli attacks and make it to hospitals are also dying because the siege means generators run out of fuel. There's a recurring pattern with advancing Israeli soldiers. They encircle hospitals, starve those seeking shelter, and snipers kill anyone who ventures out. Eventually, they raid the building and arrest medical staff and doctors. Those who've been released say they were tortured. Healthcare, like much else in Gaza, has been decimated.
Everything is decimated. These people have nowhere to go. It's very sad to see what's happening over there. You know, they got nowhere to go. They don't have any buildings anymore to find shelter in. Very, very sad to see. And it's horrible, horrible. I would not want to be in that position, right? We have to pray that this war will end. You know, we have to speak to our congressmen and say, no more killing of people in Gaza, no more killing of people in Ukraine, no more Russian lives lost, no more Ukrainian lives lost, no more Israeli lives lost. Leave each other alone. This is insanity, you know. I don't want to live in this world. It really, really saddens me to see that this is the future. Orwell had said, if you want a vision of the future, imagine a boot stomping on your head. We're going to look it up. And we're going to show you guys. Orwell also said, the war is not meant to be won, it's meant to be continuous, right? So here we have Orwell, 1984, one of his quotes. If you want a vision of the future, imagine a boot stomping on a human face forever. You know, it's really amazing. It really is amazing. So, I'm at a loss for words. You know, I'm merely human. I also have emotions and feelings, and I don't want this. I don't want to live in a world where hate is the talk of the day, you know. Call me a hippie, but, you know, I don't want this. So, I think our stomachs have been turned around during this live stream, and we're going to close off with, you're paying attention now, aren't you? So we had the London riots, right? Kids got shot and people wanted answers and did not get any answers, and they started a riot. Now Boris Johnson, then mayor of London, went to one of the boroughs in London and cleaned up and said, you are the spirit of the city, or something like that.
In the streets of London, the peace has been disturbed. Fires burning everywhere, the language of the unheard. There's a generation thwarted with no ownership and pride, and fat cats cats with bellies as wide as the rich and poor divide. A broken social contract, bottom up austerity. Oh, we can condemn it, but we're paying attention now, aren't we? Oh, blame it on the hoodies, blame it on the feral youth. But remember, you were young once and you cared about the truth. We sold out to the free market, made a couple of billionaires, and all we got was this mess and McDonald's everywhere. Keep unemployment high, keeps the cost of labour low, keeps young men out on the streets, and well, what do you know? You head down to Dixon's, you can take some stuff for free. You can get an Apple Mac and a high-def TV. But if you work in Canary Wharf in a bank too big to fail, there's much better looting going on, and you don't have to go to jail. Steal from a generation for the pockets of a few, but it can only go so far, and you're paying attention now, aren't you? Of London, the peace has been disturbed. Fires burning everywhere, the language of the unheard. There's a generation thwarted with no ownership and pride, and fat cats with bellies as wide as the rich and poor divide. A broken social contract, bottom up austerity. Oh, we can condemn it, but we're paying attention now, aren't we? Blame it on the hoodies, blame it on the feral youth. But remember, you were young once and you cared about the truth. We sold out to the free market, made a couple of billionaires, and all we got was this mess and McDonald's everywhere. Keep unemployment high, keeps the cost of labour low, keeps young men out on the streets, and well, what do you know? Down to Dixon's, you can take some stuff for free. You can get an Apple Mac and a high-def TV. But if you work in Canary Wharf in a bank too big to fail, there's much better looting going on, and you don't have to go to jail. Steal from a generation for the pockets of a few, but it can only go so far, and you're paying attention now, aren't you?
Are you paying attention? Really? Are you really paying attention? Because 10,000 kids are fighting in the Central African Republic, right? Kids are being shot and killed in Gaza. Are we really paying attention, or are we just living our lives and, looking the other way? I tend to think we're doing the last. We're looking the other way. And we don't really care if what's happening in other countries. But we do care when all the people of those countries come to our country, right, and try to live a normal life. Now, let's put a cherry on top and talk about the refugees, right? I've already shown this many times. Wait, here we have it. We found the video, and let's take a look at why the refugees are coming towards our countries, right?
Some people say that mass immigration into the United States can help reduce world poverty. Is that true? Well, no, it's not. And let me show you why. This gumball represents the 1 million legal immigrants that the United States has taken every year on average since 1990. Now, who in the world deserves our humanitarian compassion? The World Bank has one measure of the desperately poor of the world. They make less than $2 a day. And how many people make less than $2 a day in the world? We'll start with Africa. In Africa alone, there are 650 million people who make less than $2 a day. 650 million. And in India, another 890 million people, desperately poor. China adds another 480 million people, making less than $2 a day. And unfortunately, the rest of Asia has a heartbreaking 810 million people who the World Bank says make less dollars a day. And finally, there's 105 million of Latin America's population that are desperately poor. I'm told the World Bank says there are 3 billion people in the world, 3 billion people who are desperately poor, making less than $2 a day. That's 3,000 gumballs. And every year, we take 1 million and suggest that we've somehow made a humanitarian difference. Of course, we don't pull our immigrants from these desperately poor populations, do we? These people are too poor, too sick, too disconnected to make it here as immigrants. We tend to pull our immigrants out of the better off poor of the world. And Mexico tends to define the type of immigrant that we bring here because the plurality of people come from Mexico. And Mexico is poor. How many people in the world live in countries that have average incomes lower than that of Mexico? And the World Bank tells us that that number is these 3 billion plus another 2.6 billion people. 5.6 billion people in the world who live in countries with average incomes below that of Mexico.
Now, do you think taking in a few refugees, such as a couple of million, would that help the situation in the world? Would that erase world poverty? I don't think so. Are we really paying attention? Well, we'll see, right? So we have Robert Tucker asking why all of Warmbier, what Mr. Warmbier would be in North Korea in the first place. Well, if you say to a kid, right, you're not allowed to take those cookies, you're not allowed to do that, you will be punished. When you're gone and the cookie jar is in front of the kid, they're going to take the cookie, right? They'll see the punishment and stuff like that. So that's why people want to go to North Korea. You know, it's a forbidden place. So that is for Otto Warmbier. We will not forget him, nor will we forget the half-brother that was killed. And he also killed his uncle, and, you know, a brutal, brutal dictator Goodbye, Kim Jong-un. Goodbye. I hope you get a heart attack. So I will not be welcome in North Korea, I guess. Anyway, I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.